Hello, fellow human light beings. This is Mahadeva the Thunder Wizard. Welcome back to the channel. We're going to talk today about the difference between alien abductions versus extraterrestrial encounters. These are two completely different phenomena. And we're going to talk about what the difference is. So welcome back to the channel. Again, this is Mahadeva. This is the Thunder Wizard YouTube channel. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, like, and comment so that the algorithm will pick up on the channel. And I do hope there are some new people on the channel. There's a lot of action happening over on my Thunder Wizard Path Facebook page, so some of those videos are going viral, so I hope people actually make their way from Facebook here to this. All right, so I especially am hoping that there are people who have been abducted who will watch this, because it's extremely important that people who've had these abduction experiences know that they are real experiences. They're valid, real experiences. They have happened to you. And to know that there is a difference. We're going to find out what extraterrestrials actually are versus these beings that we rightly call aliens. So I've got a list of things we're going to take a look at. What happens in an extraterrestrial encounter versus what happens during an alien abduction. And that way, it's extremely important that people don't conflate. It's the biggest lie that has been perpetrated since before I was born. I was born in 1963. So the first well-known recorded alien abduction happened, I believe, in 1961 with the Betty and Barney Hill case. I'm going to make a video about that. I've talked about it in my books, michaelwilliamdenny.com, especially if you read the book Interdimensional Revolution. I give you proof that there's a difference between aliens and extraterrestrials. So this is extremely, extremely important to understand. And that is because the alien abduction phenomena, which is real, I don't even know how many thousands or millions of people have been abducted. There's been a lot. And some of them are abducted repeatedly, over and over again. And there is what people would call high strangeness to these events. Things like missing time, screen memories, all kinds of other things that would seem to be impossible to our three-dimensional experience. But the biggest lie is the conflation that most people have. Most human beings alive today don't know the difference. And there are many abductees who have experienced both types of phenomena and don't know the difference. And so one of the biggest misunderstandings that people have is the very understandable mistaken belief that there are good aliens and bad aliens, and that there is war between different alien species, and that there are aliens who are working in conjunction with human military and human governments. This is a conflation, meaning there's partial truth and falsehood, and this is done on purpose. That is why most people are confused. That's why most people are frightened of extraterrestrials, because I was myself before my first ET encounter. So very briefly, if you're new to the channel, I am a contactee of higher dimensional extraterrestrial beings. I've been in contact with them almost on a daily basis for over a year and a half. And that is because I chose to do what's called CE5, or Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, which is human-initiated contact with extraterrestrials. It's extremely simple to do. Google it if you want to figure out what it is. I teach a version of that, which is interdimensional meditation. And long story short, interdimensional meditation is just CE5, but we isolate it in a meditative practice so that you can astrally connect with them and bring them to you physically and connect to them in a trans-dimensional way. So we'll be talking about that more. So before we get started with the lists of what is and what isn't, I just want to acknowledge, first off, that alien abductions do exist. They're a real phenomenon. And that it's important that you know the difference between the two, and that you don't allow the dark force elites who have, since before I was born, they have deliberately been conflating the issue so that you can't know the difference. And in fact, their abduction scenario with what people would call the Greys, that is something that is a psyop that's been going on for over 60 years, designed specifically to confuse you, the average person, into believing that extraterrestrials are these gray beings that fly over your car or fly over your house and take you hostage by force into their flying saucer to do experiments on you, to anally probe you, to sexually abuse you, to use you in a breeding program, to implant you, all these kinds of things. And I'm here to tell you that there is a huge difference between that and actual extraterrestrials. All right, so I've overstated the fact. I need to cool my computer down here, so I'm going to have my air conditioner blow directly on the computer so it won't get so hot. All right, so if you're new to the channel, here's what I need you to do. I need you to subscribe, like, and comment. Very important, so that the YouTube algorithm will pick it up and that this channel will get the exposure it needs. And then I need you to go to the playlist page. It's free. It won't cost you anything. You just go to the Thunder Wizard YouTube playlist page. Click on 3 different playlists. The first one is the Mao Shan Qigong. Second one is interdimensional meditation, and the third one is the 12 steps to 5D. There's a bunch of other playlists there, including the aliens playlist. You can check that out. But those 3 are the action playlists that give you free the most powerful practices you can find, paid or free, anywhere. I give them to you free on this channel on the playlist. If you do at least one thing from one of those playlists every day, I guarantee you your energy and your mind and your spirit will begin to ascend. And then while you're doing that, I need you to go to the website thunderwizard.com, subscribe to the Warrior 90-Day Lightning Qigong. Again, the most powerful practice you'll ever find on the face of the earth. That's the elite practices. That's if you're dead serious about wanting to transform yourself. You don't want to wait around for the Ascension event? Great. I've got the most powerful practices. They've been used all over the planet for thousands of years. I've synthesized them into the easiest, most simple, most powerful practices that will help you evolve spiritually, mentally, and psychologically. All right, so what are we talking about again today? We are talking about the difference between alien abductions versus extraterrestrial encounters. What's the difference? Let's get right into it. I uploaded this a while ago, and the reason why I took it off is because I went off on a rant talking about the dark forces, and I started naming who they are and what they're doing, and that is not a good idea. They don't be mentioned. But I have links in the description. Go to Dr. Stephen Greer's YouTube channel and click on the link there for the June 12th Press Club event. You want to find out what real whistleblowers are about the hidden military UFO programs? That's where it is. Now, why am I not? My thing says I have no data here. So I don't know what that's all about. So just give me a second to make sure that everything's functioning. It looks like it is. All right. So go to Stephen Greer's YouTube channel and click on the June 12th Press Club event. Also, there's another video on there which will give you, show you documents proving that alien abductions are not done by extraterrestrials. They are done by humans using technology, drugs, electromagnetic weapons, PSYOP, all kinds of other things to make you believe, as well as androids. Just before we get into it, I just want you to remember, if you've done any research into alien abductions, and I have for many years, one of the most common experiences you'll hear from abductees is that when they touch one of the grays, one of the aliens, they will tell you that it doesn't feel like it's actual biological tissue. It's because it's not. We're dealing with androids, dealing with robots, dealing with people in suits. That's why they walk funny. That's why they look like insects and move like insects. There are insects that are extraterrestrials, but anyway, we'll get into it. So, you get the point. So let's get started with the first list here, which is extraterrestrial encounters. So before I get into that, very quickly, I'm giving you an assumption. You don't have to accept it. I just want you to explore it with me. So if I say something that goes against what you believe, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with somebody giving you information that you don't agree with, but you owe it to yourself to at least examine it. You can make up your mind later. So the assumption that I'm giving you, which is based on my personal experience, which I have proven to myself. If you want to know more, watch the video on my channel in the Alien playlist called How I Became an Extraterrestrial, and you can see the physical and audio evidence of me encountering a true extraterrestrial, not an alien. So all of the extraterrestrials that are coming to Earth, that have been coming to Earth since before humans even evolved, those beings, by definition, are transdimensional, meaning that their native state is in a higher dimension. And if you really want to understand what that means, I encourage you to just go on YouTube and just search for what's it like to be in the third dimension, the fifth dimension, by a scientist, not by the spiritual wannabes. Somebody's knocking on my door. Hang on. My apologies for that. It was a delivery. I had to take it. Okay, so I forgot what I was saying. So the assumption I want you to accept for this is that all of the beings that are coming to Earth are transdimensional, meaning that their native place is in a higher dimension. Usually, I'm going to use the word the fifth dimension because that's the first dimension that goes above this. The fourth dimension is time, so we don't go from 3 to 4 to 5. We go from 3 to 5 because the fourth dimension we're already in. It's called time. So these beings that are coming from other planets are transdimensional because you can't go millions of light years without going into another dimension. So the point I'm trying to make is that aliens are a three-dimensional phenomenon, and we'll get into why that is. So I want you to accept that assumption before we go any further. You can choose to accept it or reject it, but this is what I'm sharing with you based on my experience and my extensive research into this. So let's take a look here. So ET encounters happen transdimensionally. What does that mean? That means that, for instance, when you've seen the films of orbs, people doing CE5, and when they do CE5, these orbs will appear. Sometimes ships will appear, but if you like watch the movie, and everybody should, if you haven't, if you're into ufology, if you're into aliens and extraterrestrials and you have not watched the movie Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, not the third kind, the fifth kind, with Dr. Stephen Greer, if you haven't watched that, shame on you. There's so many ufologists out there, so many people into aliens and UFOs, and they don't spend any time looking at Dr. Greer's work. And I want to say it's mind-boggling, but the truth is it's not, because there is an active psyop and an active narrative and hypnosis going on to keep you from seeing that information. So anyway, go watch that movie, because in that movie you see all kinds of different things, and you do see spaceships that will phase in and out of the third dimension, and you'll see spaceships that can only be detected with cameras digitally. And there are things that happen that you won't see with your naked eye. You'll experience it, you'll feel it, but you won't see it. This is transdimensional. It's because these beings are not third dimensional beings. They can if they choose to, and it's very, very rare. But if they choose to, they can dial their frequency down to the third dimension if they wanted to physically manifest in front of you, like I would if we were walking down the street. But it's incredibly rare. They prefer to be in higher dimensional vibrations, and if you've ever been in higher dimensions, you can understand why. But one of the main reasons is practical. It's because there are dark force humans with tremendous technology that can detect ETs and transdimensional beings, and they target them, and they will kill them. There is a war going on. What the narrative you're being told by the mainstream media, the news, as well as the government, as well as the Pentagon, is that there is a secret UFO retrieval program. But the truth is that is, again, a conflation, and it's not accurate. There is a deep state military, and by the way, this military is not necessarily part of the government. They're used by governments, all the governments around the world. Pick them. They have access to all of them. And so this, when I say deep state, I don't just mean the United States. I mean beneath all of the governments. There is this deep state running everything, and they have access, and have had access for 100 years of technology that you don't even realize exists. So anyway, I'll leave that up. Check out Dr. Greer's work if you want to learn more on that. All right, so I'm getting bound up here. So ET encounters happen transdimensionally. What that will mean is, like if you do CE5, if you've never done CE5 and you go out and you bring your camera and you go out into the desert or whatever, again, anyway, if you do that, one of the things that's probably going to happen is you'll see some kind of light in the sky. You might see a light, morph into 3 different lights and then morph back into one. You might see orbs floating around you. You might not see anything, but you'll feel something. You'll take a digital photograph, and the photograph will come back, and there will be these orbs floating around. So if you're in a higher dimension and you want to literally stick your finger into the third dimension, what's going to happen is an orb is going to appear. So an orb will appear in front of you seemingly out of nowhere, but that orb is actually coming from a higher dimension. I won't take the time to explain why that is, but it's just like when, if you're a fish swimming in water and all of a sudden this finger, pokes in, and then 5 fingers coming from different directions, you think 5 different things are trying to grab you, and in fact it's somebody's hand coming from above. So these lights, one will appear and then they'll morph into 3. It's simply a higher dimensional being using their energy, or maybe even their spaceship or something else, to just simply poke into the third dimension. are experiences, strange things that we can't comprehend, that go beyond the laws of physics. But that's because we're in the third dimension, they're in a higher dimension. So without that understanding, even people who have had CE5, a lot of CE5ers who only do the sitting in their chair looking up at the sky, they think they're looking at spaceships. But I'm here to tell you that probably more often than not, you're not seeing a spaceship. You're seeing an intelligence, you're seeing an energy, you might even be seeing an astral projection that's being projected into the third dimension. And since these trans-dimensional beings, you can also call them light beings. Light is where they live. It's their medium. It's how they function. Just like air is how, sound travels through air. Air is the medium for sound. The medium for these higher dimensional beings. And it would be the same for you if you were to shift up into a higher dimension. Your medium would be light. And in fact, physicists have proven that all of the light, including sunlight, light from your lamp, your phone, all light in the third dimension is leaking into the third dimension from the fifth. So that's why we call them light beings. And that's why extraterrestrials have been experienced throughout history as being angels, as being spirits, because from our perspective, there's no difference. There's no difference between interacting with a physical fifth dimensional being that has a body and a higher dimensional spirit. We can't tell the difference because it's still a higher dimensional frequency coming into our third dimension. And it will always have the vibe of a spiritual encounter. That's why CE5, people who do CE5 always talk about it as being such a spiritual event. So just accept that. You can do your own research and prove it or disprove it if you want. So, forgive me. So, ET encounters happen transdimensionally. ETs will cease encounter immediately if human has fear. So it doesn't mean that you can't have fear, it's just that you have to be conscious of it. In my first experience, which I have in the video, How I Became an Extraterrestrial, you hear me saying, I'm afraid, I'm afraid. And I'm doing that on purpose because I am letting the ET know that I am having a fear response, but that I am consciously aware of it and that I am seeking to go past it. So if you do have fear, just own it and just ask for help and just say, this is, now it's very normal to have fear. Once you experience them, that fear will go away very quickly, almost immediately, once you understand what's happening. And again, if for me, if I hadn't been thinking of the reality of the situation, which was that a physical being from another planet is just phased out of my three-dimensional experience, and I'm feeling their energy and I'm hearing telepathic messages and I can feel the being touching me on the top of the head. If those things weren't happening and I thought I was just having a spiritual experience, I wouldn't have had any fear. It was just the mental idea that this was a physical extraterrestrial, and all the garbage that I'd seen all my life, from the movie Communion. I read all of Whitley Strieber's books, Fire in the Sky movie, all of the alien abduction stuff. I was programmed to be afraid. But there is something that is different. There's nothing like it. When you experience a higher dimensional being, it's different from anything you've ever experienced in the third dimension. And so your third dimensional mind and body in the beginning might flip out because it doesn't understand what's happening. So the thing to do is if you stop and you listen to the energy that's coming to you, it's always going to feel loving. It's always going to feel, in fact, incredibly loving, incredibly powerful, peaceful. But it's different. It's not a third dimensional energy. So in the beginning, there might be something for you to get over. But if you say, I'm afraid, help me through this, they will. But if you're afraid and you jump into the fear and you get defensive, they will leave immediately. This is one of the ways you know that ETs are not aliens, because aliens they'll abduct you whether you want it or not, whether you're afraid or not. In fact, they want you to be afraid. ETs cannot tolerate causing you any pain, and that includes fear. So ETs will cease the encounter immediately if human has fear. ETs never violate your personal boundaries. That's why they never abduct. I don't think they never abduct, not only because of that, but because it's the logistics of it. For you to go onto their ship physically, you would have to physically shift your frequency to a higher frequency. So when you talk to people who have actually been on extraterrestrial craft, it's always going to be in a meditative state. It's always going to be in their astral body, in dreams. You know, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but it's so incredibly unlikely, and the you know, the logistics of it are so difficult that they would have to first shift you up to a higher frequency to be able to transport you. Now, I've heard some stories of this happening. For instance, in one case, and I don't know this is true, but I'd be willing to accept it as true. There was a CE5 event that was going on in Mount Shasta, and there were a few people there, and I think only 2 people saw a being. Now, he looked human. He was tall. He wasn't human, but he basically looked human. And he appeared, and they sensed him. They could feel his higher dimensional energy, which we'll talk about. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, one of the people that were standing with him just disappeared, and the ET disappeared. So from the perspective of the 3D humans, the ET and one of the people that was talking to the ET disappeared, just was gone. And then they ended up coming back later, and they were, you know, transformed, and they went to another planet. So supposedly, physically, this person went. But what ended up having to happen is what I know from experience would have to happen. That person would have to be shifted up to a higher frequency out of our third dimensional experience and ability to detect them. From the perspective of the person who went on the craft and went to the other planet, everybody was around him. So from his perspective, he didn't disappear. They didn't disappear. He just was talking to the alien and said, let's say that, and they wandered off together. And so from his perspective, he was kind of confused as to why they said he disappeared. He said, I didn't disappear. Well, that would make sense, because this is the experience of extraterrestrials. They can see you. They can experience you. But they're shifted up. At the very least, they are shifted up to a higher frequency above our current three-dimensional frequency. And it's just like a radio. You know, you shift it to another frequency, you get a different channel. So they have the ability to see the lower dimensional frequencies, but you won't see them unless they make the effort. There's lots of people who do CE5 who get physically touched. You know, you'll feel a hand on your shoulder, or sometimes a hand will go into your hand. I know of one person that got a hug. You won't see it, you'll just feel it. So from the perspective of the ET, they can see you and they can touch you, but they're phased up just out of your current third dimensional frequency. So it's difficult for you to see them. That is something that happens in real ET encounters. That is not what happens in alien encounters. And we'll get to that when we get to the alien list. Just be patient. I want to get to the positive stuff first. ETs will never violate your personal boundaries. ETs always focus on empowering the individual. Now, that is not what happens during an abduction. There are, like abusive, narcissist psychopaths, they will try and gaslight you, and they do what's called trauma bonding, which is in between violating your boundaries, in this case experimenting on you, paralyzing you, sexually abusing you, putting thoughts into your head, making you see things. In between that, they will then act like your friend. I did talk to an abductee who, in her story, she explained that she was on a ship completely in the third dimension, not in a higher dimensional state. And in between not knowing what the beings were thinking and what was going on, which by the way would never happen in an actual encounter. You'd know exactly what was happening, even though it might be different from your experience. You'll still have an understanding of what's happening. You'll be fully involved in it. But she talked about how, then they were creating this bond of love, but at the same time they're, using her for breeding programs and taking her eggs and creating children against her will and doing all that. So this is psychopathic abuse. And so even psychopaths can be loving and kind, but they do that to keep you connected. Then they abuse you. It creates a trauma bond. ETs don't do this. Everything that happens is completely your choice. If you don't want any of it, you can opt out. Just like you can in a person that loves and cares about you. You can say, leave me alone, go away, I'm hanging up the phone now. You can break, you have control over how much interaction you have. That doesn't happen in alien encounters. ETs communicate primarily through interdimensional telepathy. So in my book, which you can get again here at michaelwilliamdenny.com or on Amazon Kindle or Audible, Extraterrestrials Are Coming to Earth. In that book, I tell you exactly what was going on, and that's a great book to read because I was just learning it. I was just experiencing it, so I was really trying to figure it out. I mean, I've gotten used to it to the point now that I don't really think about it anymore. So it's just something that I understand and I live with. But in alien abductions, they do use telepathy, but it's done through technology. It's incredibly destructive and invasive. In fact, there's, if you listen to Linda Moulton Howe, who thinks she's talking about governments and ETs working together and using telepathy, in one case, knocked some guy out, put him in a coma, because they just didn't know how much frequency to use. It was obvious that supposed alien was a human-built robot that was using technology to forcibly put in telepathic information. And you hear voices in your head, you hear frequencies, all of that. That's usually a sign of alien, which means human technology being used forcibly and destructively against you. Extraterrestrials, they communicate to you, at least your experience will be that they're communicating telepathically. Now, interdimensional telepathic communication has a very specific experience. So let me be clear, if they wanted to, they have the technology, they can implant pictures in your head. That has happened to me very early on. First couple of encounters, pictures were, like somebody took a photograph and, emailed it. It was emailed into my head. I saw things, but that was because I was not open or able to telepathically communicate. I had to work towards that. But telepathic communication, you're not going to hear voices. You're not going to see those kinds of pictures most of the time. Almost 100% of the time, that'll never happen. You might see things, but it will. The way that it works is your imagination has to be a part of the process. Which means you have to choose to be in the process. This is why a lot of people who do see E5 don't get telepathic downloads, don't have dreams, don't have communications. It's because they're not open to it, or they haven't learned. They're so deeply encased in the third dimension they can't. This is why CE5 in the beginning is always about seeing lights in the sky, because visually seeing something is easier than actually telepathically hearing something. So when you have a telepathic experience, you're going to feel as though your mind is telling you something. You're going to hear it in your own voice more than likely. You know, just like when you have a thought, it'll be like that, but and so it will have the experience as though you're making it up. This is one of the first things that happens, and there is a danger of making stuff up. Don't get me wrong. You have the ability with your imagination to make things up. That happens all the time. When I'm doing telepathic communication with them, lots of times I will repeat back to them mentally what I've thought they've said, because I want to make sure that I'm hearing it right and I'm not imposing on them. There's another aspect that goes along with it, which there's an electromagnetic, energetic force which they can, which is us putting a lot of feeling into it. So if I'm talking to you and I'm being just very drab, but if I put a lot of feeling into it, right, it changes the sound, and you can feel it. So when they put a lot of feeling into their telepathic communication, you can feel it. Like you can feel an electromagnetic charge that does not feel like it's part of this reality. And if you don't know what it is, you might have you might feel like you're having some kind of a anxiety response to something. So that's one of the ways I know I'm getting paged, when I'm getting texted by them when they want to talk to me, is in my heart I'll feel this very powerful electromagnetic energy, and my first human physical response will be to feel anxiety. And I'll go, oh, I'm getting a text. And it's just, the anxiety is the human body responding to the higher dimensional energy. I'm talking all over the place, but anyway, I'll try and make it shorter so we can get through this. Primarily through interdimensional telepathy, ETs do not need to use breeding programs, experiment, take samples, etc. And that's simply because they're in a higher dimension. So even if ETs wanted to come and study you, because they're higher dimensional beings, the last thing they need is a sample of you. The last thing they need to do is implant you. If you know anything about higher dimensions, they can see through you. They don't need X-ray machines. They don't need MRIs. They can see through your physical body. They can see your emotions. If they're in a higher dimension, they can also see, and they are in the present, they are in the future, they are in the past simultaneously. So the idea that they would even need to take a physical sample of you is ludicrous. Only if you're in the third dimension. You know who needs to take samples? Humans. Because humans are third dimensional beings. So anything that has anything to do with taking a sample, implanting, swabbing your cheek, anal probes, that's a human, because humans live in the third dimension. ETs are transdimensional. Breeding programs, that whole nonsense about their planets are dying and they need your DNA, that's all nonsense. You know who likes to do breeding programs to create superhumans? Humans. ETs never use missing time or screen memories. Why? Again, people conflate. It drives me crazy. People who do CE5, they'll go and have a CE5 experience, and then there's one guy who wrote an article. He's driving home, and he went into a hotel, and he lost his phone. Oh my God, the ETs took my phone. And then he spent an hour looking for his phone. He went, oh my God, that didn't feel like an hour. That's missing time. Another one, people are driving home and they're speeding, so they think they're going to get home, in an hour and a half, and it takes them 2.5 hours, and they go, oh, it must be missing time. Look, missing time is something you do when you're abusing somebody. When you are physically, psychologically abusing them, people have a trauma response and they forget. So big chunks of time disappear because they dissociate, because they can't handle it. And humans have the technology to create missing time because they don't want you to remember what they're doing. In fact, the first recorded abduction experiment, the supposed aliens said to Betty Hill that they were going to take away the memory, and she got very upset. She wanted to remember, and I said, no, it's better that you don't remember. ETs don't do that. ETs want you to remember. They want you to remember because the whole point of them connecting with you is for you to wake up. Wake up to your multidimensional spiritual essence that you had before you came into this 3D video game. So they have no interest in giving you missing time. They have no interest in giving you screen memories. Screen memories are about so you don't remember accurately what happened, because what is going to happen a lot of times is, we'll talk about it a little bit. Let's see if it's here. Let's see, did I miss it already? Oh, okay, we're going to see it later. Anyway, sorry, I got so many things going on in my head. Anyway, we'll get to this, to what I was going to say in the next list. So ETs do not use breeding programs, etc. ETs never use missing time or screen memories. ET experiences often have past life connections. So one of the things that will happen when you're interacting with an extraterrestrial, again, their desire is to wake you up to your multi-dimensional true identity. So one of the things that will happen is they will tell you about past lives. You might have a vision of a past life. One of the strangest things that has happened with me is that people who have passed away, my mother, my father, my sister, my fiance, but specifically my mom and my dad both came to me and shared with me past lives that I've had with them. For instance, my mom was my daughter in a past life. And so it explained all kinds of things. Anyway, very powerful, very strange, very mind-bending. But this is one of the things that happens. And that lets you understand who these ETs are. They're not strange alien beings from other planets that are coming to study the strange animal humans. Let's take some samples. What is They don't need to do that because they're souls just like you. The main difference between them and us is that they are connected to the higher dimensional spiritual nature of their essence, which is they have awareness of past lives, they have awareness of karma, they have awareness of all of that, and they remember you. They've had past lives with you on other planets, they've had past lives with you on Earth, they've been human before, all of that, and they just remember. They haven't forgotten any of it because they're not in the third dimensional matrix, which forces you to forget. It's the whole point of it, so that you can learn without remembering who you were. Really gets you to an authentic space within yourself to really learn. But they're above that, and so they're going to want to remind you of who you were in other lives and how they've known you in other lives. That's not something that aliens do. ETs have direct connections to higher dimensional deities and non-physical beings. So from our perspective, there's the physical and the non-physical. Again, but from their perspective, like if we were to shift into the fifth dimension, it would be a smorgasbord. You would be able to communicate with physical beings. You would be able to see into lower dimensions and see other third dimensional beings. You could even interact with them if you wanted. They would flip out because they wouldn't know what was going on. They'd think it was a ghost or something. But if you wanted to, you could. And you could interact with higher dimensional beings. You would have direct access to deities. It wouldn't be some weird thing like you're praying to a deity, I hope God heard me. No, you'd be, I know because I've done it. One of the things that's happened with connecting to higher dimensions is I've gone to the highest source deities and talked to them, just like I'm talking to you right now. And so you'll have that. You don't have to pray, and you just, hey, so-and-so, and whoever it is, Kali, Shiva, Odin. If you believe in Jesus, I'm sure you could connect to Jesus, whatever. Buddha. You can connect to all of them, communicate with them. There's no such thing as death. If somebody leaves a physical body, their spirit is just as available to you as it was before. This is something that happens with extraterrestrials that doesn't happen with aliens. All right, so there are the ET encounters. ET encounters happen transdimensionally. ETs will cease encounter immediately if human has fear. ETs never violate personal boundaries. ETs always focus on empowering the individual. ETs communicate primarily through interdimensional telepathy. ETs do not need to use breeding programs, experiment, take samples, etc. ETs never use missing time or screen memories. ETs' experiences often have past life connections. ETs have direct connections to higher dimensional deities and non-physical beings. Again, I go into depth into a lot of these things in my book. Extraterrestrials Are Coming to Earth, which you can get at michaelwilliamdenny.com or Amazon Kindle and Audible. All right, now let's go to what aliens do. Alien abductions. Alien abductions are always in the third dimension. That doesn't mean that strange things don't happen. But when you talk to people who have been abducted, the thing that is so frightening and strange is that they were physically abducted. When they're in the craft, they're physically in the craft. Again, I was listening to the abductee that I met with. She was speaking. We were both speaking at some UFO conference thingy. And she was, as she's floating up in the air, you know, being pulled up by a tractor beam into the flying saucer, she's checking to see if she's alive, and she's not dreaming. She says, no, I'm not dreaming. I'm fully awake. She gets up in there. She says, I'm not dreaming. I'm fully awake. She's able to touch physical objects and touch the beings and the people, all of that. So that is a third dimensional experience. You read Whitley Strieber's books, he's having a third dimensional experience. The Betty and Barney Hill abduction case, all of the other famous abduction cases, they are physically having a third dimensional experience, even though there are things going on that seem to be highly strange and impossible. But the question is, what's creating that? Again, let me give you another, I've shared about this before. I wish I've been looking for it. It was such a long time ago. I would give you a link to it, but military abductions. There was a woman who was being abducted by aliens, according to her, for years. And the same thing would happen every time. The ETs would show up. They'd flash a huge, spotlight on her house, blinding, again, Whitley Strieber says the same thing, blinding you with a spotlight. And then she would go into a catatonic state and she would become paralyzed, wouldn't be able to move. Her brain would get foggy. She wouldn't be able to think, and she knew what was coming. And then she would see the grays floating down through the ceiling or coming in through the wall, grabbing her against her will, taking her physically, and then being, pulled up into the spacecraft where they go and abduct her and experiment on her, sexually abuse her, etc., etc. So she'd been through this before, and it was happening again. Oh my God, here it comes. But then something strange happened. She heard a very loud, metallic machine crashing noise, like an engine, like somebody, throwing a brick in an engine. And then all of a sudden, she was out of the stupor. Now, what had happened just before that is that the grays started coming in through the walls and they were coming to get her. But then when she heard that strange sound, she woke up and she had her, her senses again. The grays had metamorphed into humans in fatigues, military fatigues. And they realized something was up, and they told her to stay put, and they backed out. And then she went out and looked, and they got into a helicopter and flew away. So what that means is that that whole experience of ETs coming in through the walls, that was something that was beamed into her head while she's also being attacked with an energy weapon that is making her go catatonic and making her incapable of moving. Nothing like that will ever happen with an extraterrestrial. They don't do that. It's never happened to me, nothing even close. So this is an alien encounter, not an ET, and it's in the third dimension. Abductions are always frightening and confusing. Doesn't matter how many times it's happened to you. It's frightening and confusing. It's because it's traumatic. It's because somebody is abusing you. Abuse never becomes fun. You learn how to tolerate it. You learn how to spiritualize it. You learn how to, you have the Stockholm syndrome where you spiritualize your abductors, but it's never fun. It's always confusing because there's a part of you that goes, wait a minute, something about this doesn't feel right. Something about this isn't the way it appears. This abductee that I met with, when she was giving her presentation, she talked about how she was in the ship and she couldn't tell what these people were feeling. There were humans there as well that were working with the supposed aliens, and she was told not to touch anybody because they said if she touches them, then she's going to get shocked. She ended up touching one of them, nothing happened. That's confusing. You're being lied to. ETs aren't going to lie to you. Aliens will. Alien abductions use robot, androids, and technological, biological hybrids. So they've gotten very advanced. Extremely advanced. But there's I'll put it up here. I'm not going to read it out loud. So if you need to, you can scroll in. I put this up here and somebody says I can't see it, and I'm like, really? You can't scroll in? Zoom into your phone or your tablet or whatever it is. But this will tell you what these events really are. Again, I'm not going to read it out loud because for obvious reasons. So if you need to, pause that, look at, see what it is. Here's the second one. This will tell you that these experiences are faked. And the reason why people believe them is because the level of technology that is being used is something that human beings don't know exist. When I first started sharing my experiences, I thought I would be able to interact with the ufology crowd. And there are people coming on to CE5 Facebook groups and other things like that who are ufologists, meaning they don't interact with ETs, or if they are, they're conflating extraterrestrials and aliens. But there are people on here that go to UFO conferences and make a lot of money talking about alien abductions and all of the research they've done on alien abductions and why. And I interacted with one of these guys, and I said, I'm an ET contactee, many times. And I'm telling you that what you're talking about, you're spiritualizing these abductions. These are done by humans. And he said, it's impossible. Humans don't have this technology. It's impossible. All of these people have had this experience. And then he went on to say, just because you've had an ET experience doesn't mean you know what you're talking about, which is like, well, then nobody knows what they're talking about, even the people you use as, as examples. But that's an example of, I can't tell if that guy is a plant. He might be a CIA plant who's there to promote the abductions, because if you read the document I just put up, they want to create a UFO religion. And they want to spiritualize it so that people will do exactly what they're doing. There's so many people out there spiritualizing abduction events like it's something spiritual and beautiful, and it's not. It's abuse, period. End of story. And if these higher dimensional beings that I'm interacting with, if they abducted, I would go to war with them. I would not spiritualize it. Abuse is abuse, period. Whoops. let's see here. Alien abductions use robot, androids, and tech biohybrids. So a lot of people, I've run into stuff on YouTube of people, you know, thing is, there's one woman was talking about aliens as though she wanted disclosure, but she was physically sick, which is sometimes a red flag, you know, because when you're spiritually healthy, you know, illness is not usually something that coincides with spiritual health. But she was also emotionally and psychologically, she seemed like a very angry person, and that's a red flag. And she was talking about aliens being part biological and part technological. That's how advanced the fake aliens have become. So whenever you run into that, it's a being that's biological and yet is also seemingly like an android, that's a human technological creation. Aliens violate your personal boundaries, abduct, experiment, sexually abuse. ETs don't do that. Aliens use mind control, forced telepathy, and forced mental imagery. So I told you that ETs use telepathy. They use higher dimensional telepathy, but it is never forced on you. Again, I have to quiet myself down, and I have to ask, you know, and I have to sometimes ask them to turn up the volume, you know, and the reason why that's an issue is because higher dimensional energy is very powerful. It's very blissful, but it's challenging to the third dimensional mindset when it's used. But, you know, I have to ask them, I need, you know, turn it up a little bit. Let me feel more of that energy. I really want to make sure I'm getting it right. The telepathy that's being used by humans it's not something, you know, again, look at the very first incident with Betty and Barney Hill. Barney Hill was locked into place and they were telepathically telling him don't move, and he couldn't move. I believe that the extraterrestrial alien event that happened in, I think it was Botswana back in the 80s, I believe that was human done as well, because the children talked about being locked into the gaze of the ETs and not being able to move. That's a sign of a human abduction, forcing it on you. ETs will never do that, any more than a loving family member would do that to you. These are your family members. Again, they're not trying to figure you out. They know you. They've been human before. They've been watching you your whole life. They've been cheering you on. They love you, you know, being down here and learning. The idea of forcing you into anything, why would you do that to people you love? Of course you wouldn't. I mean, it's common sense. The things that are associated with alien abductions are not loving acts. They're acts of abusive, controlling psychopaths. And in one instance, again, Linda Moulton Howe, I believe that she's an unwitting dupe. I think she means well, but she gets all of her information mostly secondhand and from people who've been abducted and from ex-military. So one of the main things you want to look for is somebody's in the military and they're talking to journalists and they're going on to mainstream news, David Grush, and they're, you know, all of that. Anybody, you know, if you listen to the real whistleblowers, which you'll find if you look at Dr. Greer's information, the 750, I don't even know how many there are, 750 actual whistleblowers can't come forward, because if they do, they'll be killed. So when somebody can waltz up to a journalist and say, I'm ex-military, and he doesn't end up face down in a river somewhere, that's a bad sign. That's a bad sign. And so in one of her experiences, she talks about that in the military, there was a private, I don't know if he was an Army guy or Marine, I don't know what he was, but he was recruited for supposed interaction with an alien, and so he was prepped beforehand. And he was told, again, this is according to Linda Moulton Howe. So again, people think they're getting information, and if they really thought about it, does it make sense? Or does it sound like human beings experimenting with technology they don't understand? So in this experience, the the military guy is told. Anyway, I could get into it, but I'm getting the vibe that I shouldn't talk about it, so I'm going to leave it alone. Bottom line is, just look at all of the stuff that you hear from supposed journalists with common sense. Does it sound like something humans doing? Are they playing around with technology, or is this an actual experience? Alien abduction technology seems to progress at the same rate as human technology. And for this one, we're going to talk about implants. I'm 60 years old, and implants was a big thing in the 80s. Around the time of Whitley Strieber's stuff. 'Cause I remember watching that, but I remember seeing news. Again, if it's on mainstream news, I didn't know mainstream news was what it is back then in the 80s. But people were showing up and going to the doctor, and they're getting these big, giant, metal things, that are like this big, getting pulled out of them. And the doctors are looking at them going, I don't know what this is. The metal, we had it tested, and the metal is, something that's not from Earth, and, all of that. And so at that time in the 80s, that was a big deal. Big, giant implants. And the thought process was, these beings are so advanced, they're coming, thousands of light years through wormholes, and they're coming to Earth, and they're implanting us so that they can monitor us, right? And that sounds, like Star Trek. It sounded completely, totally, so far beyond human technology, and so we bought into it. But if I were to tell you that now, I were to say, oh yeah, well, an ET implanted me with this big thing here so he could, use his radio to track me, you would say, we already have technology that's light years ahead of that. I mean, you can implant somebody with, this is well known. You can implant them with things as small as a grain of rice. You dig a little deeper and you find out you can implant with stuff that's microscopic. There's nanotechnology you can put into. You can put it in the water. You can, So the idea that there's some, oh my God, he's the big giant. No, but what does make sense is that in the 80s, humans were experimenting with implants, and that was as far as their technology went. So what makes more sense? That beings from Zeta Reticuli that have technology far beyond your control, that far beyond your understanding, come here, but they're the one thing that they don't have any technological advancement is in implants. And so in the 80s, they stuck big, giant, inch-long things under your skin that came out, with the first sign of an infection that a doctor can pull out and look at. I mean, does that sound like something that came from a highly advanced civilization that traveled wormholes to get to you? Or does it sound like human beings experimenting with technology? Because it's interesting, now we're at the level of what those beings should have been able to do back in the 80s. What does it sound like? It sounds like, again, it's very interesting that alien technology seems to progress at the same rate as human technology. As we already talked about, aliens use missing time and screen memories, ETs don't. Aliens carry out breeding programs, ETs don't. And here's the bottom line. If the abductee knew that the experience was done by humans, the victim would not spiritualize the contact. In other words, if there wasn't some android or guy in a suit showing up and taking you into a ship and experimenting on you, sexually abusing you, implanting you, using technology to get into your brain and put stuff in your brain, if you knew that it was a human, you would not spiritualize it. You would call it for what it was. You would call it abuse, and that it was wrong. But if they dress up as an alien and they use their technology that you don't know that they have to make you think something's happening that human beings don't have the capability of doing, then somehow this becomes a spiritual event. and you go to UFO conferences and people spiritualize abduction, even though you're being sexually abused, even though you're being used for breeding programs against your will, even though you're being implanted, even though you're being anally probed, even though you're being experimented on psychologically, energetically, physically, even though you don't have any control over when and how it happens. Right? What makes more sense? Are abductions really done by these highly advanced, spiritually advanced beings who live in higher dimensions, who don't need any of that garbage? Or is it done by humans? And is this how the dark force humans are experimenting? And where their technology and a lot of the medical stuff, is this where it's coming from? So those are the differences. Aliens abduct, are always in the third dimension. Alien abductions are always frightening and confusing. Alien abductions use robots, androids, and tech biohybrids. Aliens violate personal boundaries. They abduct, experiment, sexually abuse. Aliens use mind control, forced telepathy, forced mental imagery. Oftentimes humans cooperate with aliens during abductions. Alien abduction technology seems to progress at the same rate as humans. Aliens use missing time and screen memories. Aliens carry out breeding programs. If the abductee knew the experience was done by humans, the victim would not spiritualize the contact. So hopefully now you can filter between the two. What again is an ET encounter like? It's always transdimensional. ETs will cease the encounter immediately if human has fear. ETs never violate personal boundaries. ETs always focus on empowering the individual. ETs communicate primarily through interdimensional telepathy. ETs do not need to use breeding programs, experiment, take samples. ETs never use missing time or screen memories. ETs experiences often have past life connections. ETs have direct connections to higher dimensional deities and non-physical beings. So here's the bottom line. We are in a shift. In my book, I tell people in the interdimensional revolution, I don't tell people to get involved in any kind of rebellion. I don't tell you to vote your way out of it. I don't tell you to, get pickets. I don't tell you to do anything violent. I don't tell you to, start a new, government or new political party or campaign. What we're in right now is we're in a dimensional shift. And so based on my information, in other words, what I'm trying to say is don't waste your time trying to attack the deep state. Don't waste your time trying to expose them. I mean, I don't know that I should have even said what I've said so far. I think, I might end up deleting this because it's just, I have no interest in putting a target on my forehead. Because plenty of people doing it. Dr. Greer can do it and get away with it. But we are going through a massive shift here. And this is a dimensional shift. The ETs are here for one reason. They're here to bring in the lifeboats. And I'm using that metaphorically. They are here to help people shift to the next dimension. It's coming whether we like it or not. And I believe there's at least 3 options. There might be more. But based on what I've been told, other people who I trust, what they've been told by ETs, what I've experienced is we are in the solar flash event. And if you've watched the video, again, very briefly, ETs came to me and they showed me in a vision, they showed me the Ascension event, and it was done in a symbolic way that I would understand it. But I didn't know what the actual event was, and I asked them, what is this Ascension event going to be? Is it going to be a fleet of spaceships? Because I thought that would wake people up. There was a fleet of spaceships that, with actual ETs in it, surrounding the Earth and beaming down love, that everybody would wake up. And so I said, is it going to be a fleet of spaceships? And they said, no. It's a series of solar waves of love that will hit the Earth and shift all life and all matter to, I don't know what. And so what I believe, based on what I've been told and others, is that the Ascension event is happening right now. So in December of 2022, we had the first of the solar waves hit Earth. If you remember, there was a lot of solar events happening at the beginning of 2023. And they told me on December 21st, they said, today's the day. In fact, they took me, of course I chose to go astrally. Astrally, I was taken to another planet, and we were bunch of astral bodies were sitting in this giant amphitheater. And I'm looking around going, these look like a bunch of other people, either dreaming or in their astral body. And then there was this light being at the front, and this being said, tomorrow's the day. It's starting. And we want you to go and do your job, tell everybody, help everybody, because it's begun. The solar flash event has begun. Now, I came back after that astral travel, and as I always do, I take it with a grain of salt, and I say, I have no idea if that's real or not. Sure enough, the next day I was woken up by this energy and this power, and I went outside expecting to see spaceships, and what I saw was, the sun was shining in a way I'd never seen it before. I was feeling a powerful energy I'd never felt before. And from that day until now, the world has been completely shifting. Look at all of the truth that's being unveiled. Look at all of the lies that are being revealed. Look at how many people, just on YouTube, look at how many people that are exposing the lies on a daily basis. And just the fact that the Pentagon and mainstream media want you to believe in extraterrestrials. Now, they have another agenda. That's called the fake alien invasion, which is a whole other deal I'm not going to talk about. But the fact that that's going on means something's up. Something isn't. We're not in Kansas anymore. So the event is where that prism is, and if you see in the prism, that white light is beginning to separate into different colors. I don't know how many different frequencies of Earth there are going to be. At least 3. So there's going to be a version where the dark force wins. So there's going to be a version where it's complete dystopia, where you're living in smart cities, you're being monitored everywhere you go, you're being told what to do, you'll own nothing, according to the World Economic Forum. Everything will be delivered to you by drone. There will just be continuous lockdowns. There will be destruction of the world, because they believe that if they destroy the world, Jesus will come and turn them into kings or something. I don't know what they think is going to happen. So that's one version. There's another version in the middle. If you don't want to shift all the way up to 5D, and you don't want to live in that really dark, horrible place, there's going to be a middle version, which will be a lot like this one, except there will be a collapse. There will be a society collapse, a government collapse, and I don't know exactly, but people will have to work really hard to survive through that. But the dark force elites won't have the same kind of power that they do now, and possibly might have been overthrown, and that'll be like the second version. And then there's a third version, and that version is completely, totally beyond anything we've seen in planet Earth. It'll be a heaven on earth. There won't be any banks, there won't be any government, there won't be any we won't have any need for infrastructure. Everybody will have the ability to have 0-point energy. They'll be able to power everything from a little box in their home, which will just take energy out of the air. You won't need electricity or gas or anything like that. People will have the ability to take their little Jetson flying cars wherever they want to go. People will be living in harmony with nature. People will have, I know because I've been there, I've been taken to that frequency twice. One time they came to me and said, we're going to take you. I didn't know what they meant. I thought they were going to take me in a spaceship somewhere, but what happened is my energy shifted up to a level I've never experienced except in the most intense meditative states, but I was fully awake. There was so much DMT going through me. I was connected to everything and everyone, and I was filled with love. And I was talking to the trees. I was talking to the clouds. I was talking to the animals. I mean, I was communicating with everything, and I was just, it was unbelievable. I had the ability to dial it to a higher spiritual perspective, or I could bring it back down to a more physical. But the level of energy and bliss that was flowing through me was just unbelievable. And I've been taken to that place twice, at least twice, in my waking physical body. I've been taken there and gone there numerous times in interdimensional meditation, but only twice in my physical body. And they were very clear that this is where you're headed. This is where you're going to go. But we have a choice. We have to choose. We have to choose which frequency we want. If you want the higher frequency, you're going to have to be willing to do some self-examination. You're going to have to be willing to shift yourself out of the self-devaluation. You know, alcoholism, drug addiction, abuse, codependence, these are all signs of self-devaluation. So you'll have to get past that. You'll have to look at the wounds within you. You'll have to be willing to forgive all of the people that have harmed you. That's going to take some effort, but that's how you shift up. That's what the 90-day challenge here at thunderwizard.com, that's what that thing is designed to do. It's physical, psychological, and spiritual. And you can attack it from any one of them. You can attack it from a psychological perspective, you know, getting over all of the wounds, forgiving the people that have harmed you, and learning to love and accept and have tolerance and patience, to love yourself. On a psychological level, that will shift the other two. The spiritual and the physical will follow along. You can do it purely on the spiritual level, which is just through prayer and meditation, just to shift yourself up. You can do it purely on the physical level, which is you do physical exercises, which is what the Qigong is, which stimulates the meridians and opens up the energy, so you get the energy directly from higher dimensions. I'm going to be sharing more and more about how to do that. There's ways to do rituals that literally open up portals to higher dimensions. So you can do it physically, and once you do the physical thing, the psychological and the spiritual have to shift up, or you can do all three of them. That's what I do, because I need help. I need the extra help. So the 90-day challenge is all of that. I give you those practices and you do them. I make myself available to work with people as an apprentice. Can't do this thing alone. I'm not the only game in town. There's plenty of people you can work with, but you can't do it by yourself. You can't use three-dimensional tools to break three-dimensional problems. To fix three-dimensional problems, you have to use higher dimensional tools. You can't think yourself out of your broken thinking. You have to have somebody who you trust to guide you through that. And that's what teachers are for. So you can go and subscribe at the thunderwizard.com site as an apprentice, and you work with me one-on-one if you want. But work with somebody, whoever it is. Don't do this alone. And the interdimensional meditation, of course, which we have on the channel, which you can do. You can do the free interdimensional meditation, or you can do the advanced ones, which I have at the thunderwizard.com site. But working directly with higher dimensional beings and asking them to show you who you really are, asking for their help, they're just waiting for you. So you can do the guided interdimensional meditations, the free ones on the channel, and you can get connected to the beings that are already with you and already guiding you. You can just become aware of it. Those are the fastest ways that I know of to make that shift, and it's coming. It's coming. I don't know how soon, but it's coming. If this is accurate, it's already here, and the different frequencies. We're still sort of loosely connected, but pretty soon they're going to start shifting further and further apart. And there's going to come a point when, the lower vibrational people won't be able to move up unless they really put some effort into it. But right now is the time you can make the decision. You can choose which frequency you want. Anyway, so there we go. That's it for me at the moment. I don't see any questions here. Is this even, how many people are watching? Doesn't look like there's a lot of people on here. That's okay if we don't need to take any questions for today. So again, if you're new to the channel, what I need you to do is to subscribe, like, and comment. Go to the free playlist page on the Thunder Wizard YouTube channel. Click on the Maoshan Qigong, the interdimensional meditation, 12 steps to 5D. Do at least one thing from at least one of those playlists every day. While you're doing that, go to thunderwizard.com and subscribe to the Warrior 90-Day Lightning Qigong. And again, if you'd like my help, which I'm here to help whoever wants help, go to thunderwizard.com and subscribe at the apprenticeship level, and you can work with me one-on-one. That's it. The books, michaelwilliamdenny.com. You can look for Interdimensional Revolution. You can look for Extraterrestrials Are Coming to Earth. And the other book I recommend, I have a lot of books, but the other one I recommend is the Shamanic Secret Commandment to a Perfect Life. You can get all those at michaelwilliamdenny.com or on Amazon Kindle and Audible. There it is. I'm blowing up all over Facebook. The virals are starting to blow up on Facebook, so you can go to the Thunder Wizard Path on Facebook and support me there. But what I really want is I want to get people over here to the YouTube channel. I want people to put time into listening to the actual, the meat, the really deep stuff. All right. Since we don't have anybody asking questions, I'm just going to double check to make sure. I'm going to refresh the page. I don't think there's anybody here asking any live stream questions, but I'll check. Nope. All right, so that's it for today, my friends. As always, thank you for showing up, and thank you for everybody who's doing the work, doing the practices. Every time that you do something to evolve yourself physically, mentally, or spiritually, every other being in the universe benefits, including God himself, benefits from you choosing to evolve, and I benefit. So please, if anything, just do some of the work. Just do some of the things that I make available to you. I will benefit from that. And of course, I appreciate everybody who supports the channel. It's the way that I pay my bills and the way that I'm able to spend all my time making videos and uploading them is by your support. And the best way to support the channel is to go to thunderwizard.com and subscribe at the Warrior 90-Day Lightning Qigong and or become an apprentice. There's a bunch of other places, courses.thunderwizard.com. There are all kinds of other services that will help support the channel as well. But most important thing is please do the work, please evolve, and find that higher frequency. As always, my friends, I love you and I thank you for being here and for being who you are, and know that you are the most important being in the universe. You're the most unique, most powerful, most beautiful being of light that has ever been created. There is nobody like you anywhere. You deserve nothing but love, happiness, and bliss. And if the solar flash don't come and or I don't get shifted up to 5D, and or if I don't shift myself up, I will see you guys all very soon. Please take very good care of yourselves.